Welcome to the Nate KG podcast, a show dedicated to exploring the nuances of jump rope, where I talk with jumpers of all skill levels, backgrounds, and fitness goals. This episode is the second installment of my chat with Stewart Isaacs at Jump Rope Stewart on Instagram. In case you missed part one, Stewart is one of the top-tier world champion jumpers with a massive amount of experience in the sport. In addition to jump rope, he's also pursuing a PhD in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT. In this part of our chat, we continue to dig through speed training. Stewart explains why performing is such a vital part of being a competitive jumper. We look at why the Stanford college jump rope team was so successful and a lot more. All of the show notes for this episode can be found over at natekg.com. And now, please enjoy the second installment of my conversation with Stewart Isaacs. So, interesting. Okay, so where is you're talking about doing strength training and weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
What type of weightlifting do you do? And then to tag on to that as well, like where is your fitness at? How do you approach your fitness?
Yeah, I think, okay, so during the first year of grad school, when I was like the best shape ever,
Mm-hmm.
and I had Kaylee help me out by writing a workout. I was doing a lot of free weight lifting,
Mm-hmm.
so squats,
Mm-hmm.
with dumbbells. I was working with kettlebells and doing I don't remember what those are called. I'm really bad at all the names of these, but I was lifting kettlebells in a way that worked the core and like my legs and arms all at the same time.
Kettlebell swings?
Yeah, kettlebell swings.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Okay.
So I was doing a lot of like those just to get like overall like body strength, as well as like bench press, shoulder press. Shoulder press is really important for the moneymaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just trying to like get. Oh, and I was also doing what are these called? Like you might like go down for your squat and then you hold it for 3 seconds before you come up.
Oh yeah, like tempo reps and stuff, like a
Tempo
4-1-1
reps,
or something,
where
or
like
like
you're
1-4-1.
training, you're like under resistance as you I guess
Oh, like eccentric versus concentric training.
eccentric. Yes, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes. She had a lot of eccentric exercises as well as really explosive things like a lot of jumps.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing a lot of different kinds of jumps for height, for broad jumps, one-legged, with weight, no weight, and just to get more explosiveness for things like flipping, as well as like multiples and other hard skills like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I mean, my flips got much easier. My multiples got much easier. I was landing tricks I never landed before with consistency. I mean, it was ridiculous. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this works. And then I also started to get more serious about my nutrition as well. So trying to, increase my protein intake so I can recover faster and keep training at a high level. I think since then, I mean, like, especially today, right, there's no gyms open. So you're not going to be lifting under heavy loads anymore. I was lifting pretty heavy. Obviously, I can't do that now.
What were you lifting then? Just curious.
I finally got up to like over 200 bench press, which I'd never done before, and I was very excited about.
That's really solid, yeah.
I think when I was squatting, I think I was hovering around like 280 something for like squats with reps. I really wanted to get to 300, did not make it there.
What were your reps like for that?
Just like pretty low reps. It's like 3 to 5.
Okay. So were you doing like a 5x3 and a 5x5?
5x3. Yeah, it was more like is that like 5 reps with 3
5 sets with 3 reps or 5 sets with 5 reps?
It was more like 3 sets with like 5 reps. I think it was like pretty low set, or was it 5x3? I don't actually remember. I'm not that serious when it comes to my weightlifting regimens. I just try to like, that's why I like had Kaylee help me out, because I'm just like, just give me something to do.
No, for sure. I mean,
I don't really know how this works.
I mean, even with that information though, it basically tells enough, because like the point there is that when you're doing, you're not doing max strength, you're not doing like 1 rep, but by doing that 3 to 5 range, it matches very well with the sport of jump rope. And it's cool to hear that, because a lot of the way I've thought about doing strength training for jump rope matches that. So that's pretty cool. And the 5x5 regimen is pretty brutal, man. I did one where it was like, I don't know if this matches what you did, but it was like every 2 or 3 days. So you only do whatever that movement is
Mm-hmm.
twice, maybe 3 times a week. But
Mm-hmm.
every time you show up, you increase the weight by 5 to 10 pounds total. And it sounds so simple, man, but it is not. And like the beginning of the program that I did started with benchmarking your 1 rep max for deadlift and
Mm-hmm.
for back squat. And I was pumped, but I was also bummed because I PR'd my back squat, which was great, but the weight was really up there. So it meant like I started the program at like 80%, which was like a 270 or 280 back squat or something like that. So like it
Mm-hmm.
was 5 by 5 with that, and then like every week was another 5 pounds, which after a few weeks I had to scale back because it was just too much. But it's like, yeah, that weight training is rough, but that
That's
makes
really intense.
it
Five
dude
by
it,
five.
it dude it is, it really is. But it makes a lot of sense that that's what you were doing, and it's cool because I personally haven't programmed for other people. I've only like really chatted with Selena and tested on myself and
Mm-hmm.
taken like some lactic measurements to kind of see actually what's going on. But it's cool to hear that that similar style is also being replicated by you and by Kaylee. Both of you guys are both world champions, so that's really interesting to hear. But anyway,
Yeah. I think and Kaylee would know a lot about that, and she's programmed for other high level jumpers as well. So I'm not the only one.
that's cool. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm definitely. I've chatted with Nick before, and I need to get them both on the podcast because that'll be a
Mm-hmm.
really good conversation. Um, but anyway, so back to your training. So you're doing this strength training. Then what?
So I strength trained. Let's take it to like that year of grad school when I was like, I've never been that good in my entire life. I mean, except with the exception of hitting 104 last December, never been faster, never been stronger, most consistent at really hard multiples than I'd ever been. So like,
Mm-hmm,
especially release multiples as well.
mm-hmm,
And so I was just trying to like maintain that level of effort and skill into competition season.
mm-hmm,
And so that's like, trying to put my routine together, trying to like keep these high level multiples in my routine, as well as like really intricate gymnastics and power skills without hurting myself, of course. And that was for the most part going well. But what I noticed is that so like right after I had like was training doing weight training pretty hard, I was able to like get really good at the moneymaker in that moment. So I was
mm-hmm.
like doing it very consistently. It felt good. But then as I ramped up my speed training, um, and I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I completely lost it. Like I just couldn't do it anymore at
The
all.
moneymaker.
hmm
Mm.
and that's why I say like it's really sensitive to like what is my power to weight ratio, because I think if I go a little too much into and I don't know if this is accurate, but like I think if I overtrain, if I over strength train too much, I think that ratio gets off a bit, and I can no longer do it. Or if I'm not training it enough, I'm not strong enough to like get off my hands to like wrap it around, and I can't do it anymore. So like it's like finding that like middle ground, which I failed at, in time for competition. So by the time competition came around, couldn't get it done. And I was really bummed about that. I still haven't figured that out. Another thing is that 2017 was my senior year of college, and I was focused on
Was this
school.
Stanford?
This is at Stanford, yes.
Okay.
And so besides like just being at school, I wasn't super serious about competition when I was in college, and I was part of Stanford jump rope, and you're just kind of like having fun and performing and a lot of teaching as well. And we decided pretty late in that season, I think it was like the last month of school, that we're like, you know what, we're gonna go to world jump rope. And so I started to get serious about competition training. And I moved to Huntsville, Alabama for a job, and I put my routine together there, and I was able to like compete it and win at world jump rope in 2017, which I was very happy about.
That's what's up. Wow.
Um, so come 2018, this is my first year of grad school. I'm trying to defend it, and I was in the best shape, best like skill wise ever, and I get there and I just cannot pull it together in any of my events at all. I think I was like messing up in speed. I was like messing up in freestyle. I just couldn't pull it out. And I think what I learned from that experience is that it turns out the performance aspect of your training season is super important. I think it's not a coincidence that the people that win competition are the people that are usually performing the most, before competition. So they're going to workshops
Interesting.
and performing, or they're having like low stakes, like elementary school performances,
Hmm.
or maybe they're a professional performer. Those are the people that end up winning.
Because they're
For a long
simulating the
time.
event the most.
Hmm,
Because they're actually simulating the event. Like, because
exactly.
you can't, it's, unless you give yourself a triple shot of espresso and then have a group of people who don't know you watch you, it's very difficult to actually test and practice that feeling of being on the floor.
Exactly. You really can't replicate that by yourself. And so even though I was drilling my routine a lot, there's a lot to be said about being under performance conditions and how that translates into competition. Because when you're performing, things go wrong. They just do. Jump rope is super hard. It's really, really, really easy to mess up, and you need to be proficient in playing off your mistakes, or like going with the flow, or like knowing when to do something or when to just give up on something in the moment. And I don't think you get that practice when you're just practicing by yourself. You really need to perform. And for a long time in world jump rope, the Bouncing Bulldogs were just like unstoppable. They
Hmm.
show up and just like eat competition, and they
Hmm.
get all the awards every single year. And they're super good. And like, even though they're not like pushing it with the content difficulty as much as some other, teams, what they're really good at, and when you look at their program, they perform all the time. All of them
Yeah.
perform all the time. And so
Yeah.
it's no wonder they go out and they do these like flawless routines, because they're performance ready. They're competition ready, because at the end of the day, jump rope competition is a performance, full stop.
Right.
And so to train for it, you need to perform.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because like as you're talking, I'm thinking about how it feels different in your body when you're doing that. And I think that
Mhm.
if I was gonna sum it up, and I'm curious, what you think, it's like your body is in this fight or flight mode when you're on the stage, but when you're at the gym, you're just, for all intents and purposes, you're calm. I mean, your heart rate might be up, but like you're calm. And I've always noticed there's that. I think most jumpers will feel this when you're practicing by yourself. You're more likely, I think, to be in a place where your legs feel heavier, like it's harder to get up,
Mhm.
versus when you're on the floor, you're trying not to overdo it. Or at least I've felt that way before. Like you don't I find that you don't have as much of an issue getting up as you do controlling how high you're jumping and controlling the timing piece of what your arms are doing with how high you're going.
Yeah, exactly. There's a skill I do. I call it the eye dive. There's a story behind that. But like, I do a back handspring, and I jump it
Hmm.
before my hands land on the ground.
And it's
Um,
extremely impressive, by the way.
Thank you. It's also really, really scary, and
I bet.
it's terrifying. And like, it takes. I have to like, I'm like, oh, am I going to do the eye dive? All right, let me get a few days of like getting ready for it before I actually do it.
That's
And in
funny.
practice on the gym floor, it's abominable. It's the worst.
Mm.
But at competition, it feels like butter. Because I'm like energetic enough that I'll just get it done. Where the problem is like, don't overdo it, just like what you said. But whenever I'm doing a full out routine prep by myself, it's just so painful and heavy and scary. it's
What is the story behind the name?
okay. I will say that Dylan Plummer is the first person that I know to have done it. So really, he probably should have named it. Because we were I like had the idea. I think it was summer 14 or something like that. And I was talking to him. I was like, I have this idea for a trick where you jump it before you land on your hands. And he's like, yeah, I think he was talking to someone else who had the idea as well. And we get into this like gymnastics gym, and he just does it. I'm like, what? I'm
Just a
like,
full
Dylan, oh
send and
my
landed
god,
it.
that's
That's
so.
it. You just
He
hit
just
it.
did it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. So it wasn't for several months later. I guess this must have been 2013. When Zeb did this skill where he did basically the same concept, except it was a suicide kip. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
now's the time. So it wasn't until then that I actually like summoned enough courage to actually do it. And then it's called the eye dive, but we can revisit that if we like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that skill is it's funny to hear the history of it because for people like I haven't been I'm in competitive jump rope, but I'm not super tight knit in the community, you know, in terms of like I haven't been to camp before, I haven't been around many of these things. But it's funny to hear that history with it, especially that it was around the time that Zev was doing his version with the suicide kit, because I remember seeing that and
Hmm.
that skill, especially the way Zev does it. I don't know. There's something about Zev's style with his strength skills that has always been very unique, you know?
Yes, I mean, because he's a big person,
Yeah,
like
no,
over 6
exactly.
foot, and so like when he has really good style too, I think he focuses on that a lot, or at least when he was jumping. And so like to see someone that big move like that is very impressive and like fun to watch. And then like the shapes he can make just because he's so lengthy, make it more aesthetic, I think, in some ways.
How about his oh man, what was it? Was it a suicide kip and then pushes out into a handstand back handspring back tuck?
Yes,
That was insane.
yes. I think there was a lot of point of my career where I would consider Zev a rival, and he's a
That's
very good rival
fun.
to have.
That's fun. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, actually thinking back to it, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What about I have I have a question that I did not send to you, but I do want to ask you about that
Yeah.
one time you were doing speed and your shoe fell off.
Oh yeah.
That really sticks out for me. Can you I'm sure it was just not tying your shoes as tight as they should have been, but like can you describe that event in that day?
Yeah, that was Nationals and I think it was Galveston, Texas, 2010. It
Mhm.
was 3 minute. It was Grand Nationals and I was on the floor with Trevor Norris, who was really like I think he was probably the best person in 3 minute speed in the United States at that point.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I remember this was the same year as FISAC Worlds in England, and this is before then. So, really we're on the circuit to like prep for that, and I qualified for that to like represent the U.S. for that, and so it was really important to me to like you know, be really competitive. And I had trained 3 minute really well, and I was going for 480. And so I was on the floor with Trevor, and, I'm trying to get this goal, and I noticed my shoestrings are coming undone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And at some point, it was just unbearable to jump with. So I'm not sure if I think I just kicked off my shoe to try and keep going because I'm
Yeah.
trying to salvage as much of it. I was like exceeding my pace. So I'm like, oh, I know I can hit it. So
Yeah.
I just need to like salvage this as much as possible. It was so grueling. I hated it.
So like get rid of that
Um,
shoe, just kick it off, like whatever.
yeah, so I kicked it off and just tried to like salvage as much of that 3 minute as possible. I think I ended up with like 470 something. And this is important because before that year, I was not good at 3 minute. I was good at 1 minute. I was decent at 3 minute, but I never really. I'm not sure. That might have been the first time I made it to stage in 3 minute. That might not be true, but I think it is.
What changed?
Music.
That was
Started.
it.
There was a song "Bombs Over Baghdad." I trained to that. It was perfect for 480 pace. I just jumped to that a lot.
And that was also your freestyle song, right?
It was. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So that music really is the key to unlock it then.
Yeah, Vivian told me that. This is Vivian Vida. She's
Hmm.
from like Hungary, Brazil. Super, super good, really fast at speed. She was like, "Oh, you gotta train the music," and like I heard her, and but I didn't like understand how significant of advice that was. Literally, everyone who's super fast, all the Australians, all the South Koreans, everyone in Hong Kong, they train to some type of BPM measurement
Hmm.
because if you're not objective with how you're training in terms of how fast you're going, you
Hmm.
can't expect to be great at it. You need to know exactly how fast you're going at
Hmm.
all times.
Hmm. Interesting. So that music really, because it's funny you say that I have the same. I've had the same mindset of like, yeah, I get it. Like music helps, and like, yeah, BPM is cool and that's great, but it
Hmm.
actually does make that much of a difference.
Yes. I think to be competitive in speed or to really just push yourself to like the limit, you have to train to some type of BPM version of something, right? Either it's music or it's just clicking. Just going willy nilly without music
Hmm.
is just not going to cut it anymore.
I feel like mentally it doesn't work either. Like, because the way you have to think, it requires an incredibly high level of grit and raw discipline in order to push yourself through that, because there is
Mhm.
no pleasure piece to it. It is just raw pain. And like, I think mindset wise, when you, I've kind of found personally, and this is obviously anecdotal, that's not really supported by anything other than my thoughts, but like having that number, that timestamp in front of your, like in front of you in terms of like, mentally, I find that no matter what that timestamp is, I'm going to be tired at 5-10 seconds before it's up.
Mm.
Versus like if you extend that 10 more seconds, then at that new marker, I'll be tired. Like you know what I mean? Like it's the
Yes.
number that sets your pace and your mental like approach to it. So it's interesting to hear it in terms of when you're taking your breaks, when you're using music,
Mhm.
are you timing it or are you going by feel?
Well, what you just said, I think there's research that supports that. I just read this book called, I don't know if it was Endure, by this
Mm.
like he writes about marathon runners, and I think the guy who ran sub 2 hour for the first time, he's featured a lot. Kipchoge, he's Kenyan.
I'm not
Sub
actually,
2 hour
I don't know the name, but that book sounds somewhat familiar actually.
Yeah, he does talk about that where, you know, there is a physiological response to, what you understand to be the end. And so what you're talking about is spot on to what they parse out in the research.
So when you're training with music, the
Hmm.
breaks that you take, are you timing them or are you going by feel?
When I'm training with music, I do go by feel for the most
Hmm.
part. But like I try not to like most songs are constructed such that there's a chorus and there might be some verses and then the chorus, and usually I'll match up my jumping to one of those. I train to do the fire and the flames a lot. It's
Oh,
like a
dude,
perfect.
well done, well done. That just
It's
made me so happy to hear.
yes. It's I mean actually Zach Tomlinson was one to say, "Oh, this is a great song to train to," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. This is
That's
awesome."
funny. So you
Um,
use that for your speed training or just all
oh
training?
yeah, it's great. So it's like 100 BPM. It's got these perfect amounts of time in
It's
between like.
intense.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of energy. So like I just like, okay, I'll do my 100 to the chorus and then or the verse, and I'll just take my breaks and the other ones, right? And just do it over and over again. And that works out pretty nicely. I think when it comes to speed, mindset is the most important part, more so than the physiological, how your body is, in my opinion. Because I think, the way I approach speed now is that, especially for 3 minute, I can do it, right? If I really needed to, I could get that five, whatever
Hmm.
number I'm aiming for. It's tricking my mind to allow my body to do it. And so when I'm training for 3 minute, I'm actually training my mind to suffer more. Is if I
Hmm.
can put up and like withstand more suffering, that's gonna give me a better score. And even when I was young, um, I counted myself, and I would always advise like jumpers, you need to count yourself because you
Hmm.
need to know exactly what you're getting at
Hmm.
every marker, and then from there, you back out. If your goal is 480, then you need to be hitting 80 every 30 seconds. So that's
Hmm.
80, 160. You need to be at 200 at the well, you need to be at like 240 at the one and
Hmm.
a half minute mark. Things like that. And that way if you're on pace or if you're ahead of pace or not, just like the marathon runners do.
Hmm.
But also with the music, it does allow you to push yourself and allow your mind to accept more suffering than you might otherwise do without the music. Because at the end of the day, when you're training for 1 minute, 30 second, 3 minute speed, by the way, I strongly believe that the time intervals we currently have in the sport are bad and we need to revisit those. But that's a different conversation. We can get there if you want. But when you're training for these events, are you willing to suffer enough to get the score you want? And when you're training yourself to accept the suffering.
Hmm. I really agree with that. And it's cool to hear you say that. Again, so much of what you're saying is really matching a lot of the thoughts that I've had and the things that I've spoken about with other jumpers. Like when I've
Mhm.
talked with Selena, a lot of our mindset again was train greater than the events. So it's the same thing you're saying here in terms of getting your mind, your mind right. There are so many different directions to go with right now. We're going to get to the part about the intervals, but first I want to share an anecdotal thing to kind of match that with when you specifically, or when an experienced jumper is taking a break or taking a rest. Personally, I used to think that, like, in order to do it correctly, in order to take the correct rest time, you need to match it with an exact clock. And that wasn't really working for me. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, and this is why I asked you originally the question about intervals. I didn't think that having a 30-second rest or a 1 minute rest, like it can work for some workouts and it is valuable for some workouts. But by and large, it didn't really work for me, especially when you get to freestyle training, because how do you quantify these sets of doing your work? But then, like, how do you know when to go back to it? Because different combos, different lengths of things, it's a different type of energy system being used. You practicing, a set of like 3 frog skills is very different than a set of 15 quad skills. They're both difficult, but it's a different type of difficult on the body. So how do you actually gauge that rest time? What I've found, and this is just with myself, but I've measured heart rate while I'm doing rest times and doing speed workouts and freestyle workouts. And I've taken lactic measurements. And what I found is, and this is to offer to you or to any other experienced jumper, I think that those of us who have extensive experience with jumping and doing these events have a very accurate intuition for our rest times. Because as I was doing things, I was noticing there is a science with energy systems on where your heart rate should be at certain time periods, right? If you're doing a certain type of medium endurance workout, which is the majority of jump rope, your heart rate should be at a certain percentile. And I was doing a lot of testing with this, with a heart rate monitor, and then again pairing that with lactic measurement, because that actually tells you what's happening in your blood, which is a different level. And what I found was I was really paying attention to, like, subjective feeling matched with the numbers. And I found that the way, whenever I felt ready to go back into the workout, and that's not, okay, I'm calm. It's like, okay, I'm at a place now where I'm still sweating, I'm still working hard, but I am ready to go continue, versus that when the time was up, but I didn't feel like I should go, that was, my intuition was actually correct based on the numbers. That my heart rate was 5-10 beats per minute too high, based on how I should be structuring things to match the right stimulus for the workout. So, and quantifying freestyle training is very difficult, but this is what kind of brought on me testing that, which was like, okay, well, it's all fine and great to go try that quad combo and then like rest and then do it again, rest and do it again. But then how long is that going to take? How many hours are you going to be in the gym before you get the right amount of practice done, So point being that I think a lot of the experienced competitors like yourself, you've been through it so much that your subconscious intuition about when is a good time to rest and when is a good time to get back to it is actually super accurate. And I suspect it would be replicated. My experience would be replicated with other jumpers as well. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on that I wanted to throw in there. But let's go to the time periods, the time frames for competitive events. Why do you think 30 seconds, 1 minute, and 3 minute are not correct?
The easiest way you can answer that is just by looking at who wins. The same people win all those events. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Like, you would not expect Usain Bolt to win the endurance event and the 100 meter, right? I think what's happening now is these events are so close together. People who are, I guess, physically middle distance, they're the ones who can, I guess, win. Or, yeah, I mean, like, you have some deviation where I would probably classify Luke Boone as more of an endurance person, more so than, I don't know, maybe some other jumpers, but he can still win like 30 seconds and 3 minute.
Hmm.
Same thing with a lot of the other people, like Tori or a lot of the jumpers from like Jaiwan from South Korea.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so to fix that, I do think we need to look at the length of time and map that onto track a little better. So our short distance event probably shouldn't be 30 seconds. I think 10 or 15 seconds probably makes a little more sense.
Uh-huh.
I think 1 minute maps pretty well onto a 400
Yeah,
meter.
I was gonna say,
So,
yep.
right, that probably makes sense. And then 3 minute is probably a little too short. 3 minute could be 4 minute or
Mm.
5 minute.
To match
Um,
like an 800 better
Well, yeah, I guess like a mile time
or a
really.
mile time. Yeah, right.
I think Molly Metz did this metric where you can map on the number of jumps to a mile, right? And so I think when I looked at that, that's a 4 minute mile would be like a 5:30 pace, 5:30, 530 jumps in 3 minutes.
Mm.
So, and which makes sense to me. So I would argue that her mapping system probably makes a lot of sense. Not a lot of jumpers are getting 5:30, but some can, and I do think that's probably like some like breakthrough, measure in our sport. So I would argue that if that's the case, then maybe the mile should be, or our version of the mile, might be something like 4 minutes or 5 minutes, right?
So you're saying that the total number of steps should be a marker for the duration of the event, or are you saying like that? Uh, like what is the variable that you think defines what the event length should be?
I think the time makes is what defines what the event length should
Mm-hmm.
be. It's a timed event, so
Mm-hmm.
the time should say it. And I think how long you're going to put your body under stress is probably the we should be looking at that more critically when we're deciding what the event should be. And I would argue that um, our approximate for the mile then you could make the argument that 3 minute is about right, but it probably does need to be longer.
Mm-hmm. It seems a little bit too long for an 800 and a little bit too short for a mile,
Right.
which is a weird time there. But well, it's interesting that you say that because it kind of brings up a question of like, why be time based and not step based? Why not have 530 be the number you have to hit, and whoever can do it, like that number is
Hmm.
the equivalent of our distance. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Which, I mean, there's a lot of logistical issues that would go with that, but for all intents and purposes of the discussion, it's more or less equivalent, just a restructuring of how that event would go, which would be interesting of how that would actually play out in a competition, because, the obvious hole, and now I'm just kind of going off on a tangent spitballing, but like the hole
Hmm.
with that would then be you would need extraordinarily accurate judges, because if
Yep.
one of those is off and you call it a second early, that second would literally make all the difference,
Exactly.
especially with the elite athletes who are hitting that 530. but
Yes.
but I feel like actually now, if you were to map it the way Molly has, it actually seems like that would be far closer to an 800 in theory, because I would imagine for those that can hit that score in 3 minutes, they would start to get faster and pull it down into the 2 minute, the late 2 minute range,
Hmm.
which does start to get around the paces of the common pace for an 800 in track.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah. So I guess when I think about 800, I think it's probably like, well, okay, I was able to get like a little bit under 210 in 800, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the really competitive people are going like what 140s probably.
Okay.
So about 2 minutes is the range for 800. So you double that, you get your mile. Let me actually find this number that Molly uses because now I'm very curious. What is her organization again? She does.
Jumping rope, I think.
Yes.
As you're going through that, I was just gonna pepper in a couple of other questions as you're looking for
Yeah.
that. Do you play music?
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh
Yeah.
wait, you mean as a musician?
Yeah, as a musician, yeah.
Oh yeah, I do. I play drum set.
Nice. Okay. That and there it is. Now it clicks. It's funny because I know a lot of jumpers they do explore a lot of different things, and that now makes a lot of sense why not. I mean, not that it's a causal effect, but like, you being tuned in to beats like that really brings the whole conversation all the way around.
Yeah, I guess it does make a lot of sense. Yeah. By the way, I was wrong with the Molly Met system. I think based on my calculations, so a 400 meter would be 180 speed steps, right? So that means that, oh gosh, yeah, I would need to do the calculation again. But what I had here is like 540 in 3 minutes is a sub four jump rope mile, which does make
Hmm.
sense. It's going to take
Interesting.
me more time to like actually do the math to say, okay, what should it be based on this? I don't know.
Hmm. I would, I would really like to. It'd be interesting to pilot test this and see how that actually works out in the competition. I don't not necessarily not sure how that would actually work out, but it'd be really interesting to get some jumpers together and do it that way, because
Hmm.
a lot of what I was doing for myself too was taking certain scores and doing this, just trying to do it in the least amount of time as possible.
Yep.
Because actually, you know what? I totally forgot. I did a lot of stuff last year testing out different speed training and stuff. And I remember now, one of the things I did do was I took all of my splits that I wanted to hit and I trained the numbers and not the times. And I'd made I'm really glad I remembered this. I made a huge shift in the way I approached even the ones that I was doing that were time, like a 1 minute.
Hmm.
I set a number for myself, and when I would have the clock going, and luckily I had a clock that would beep at the end, but I didn't have it say anything in the middle. I didn't look at the clock. I just went for the number. And the idea of chasing a number versus, suffering until the time is up made a massive difference with the way I approached it.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's why you have to like, I assume you were counting yourself, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. That's why, like, one of my advice for jumpers is, oh, you should count yourself because
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
to know what you're going to get. And I train the same way, right? Like I say, I'm going to get 50 jumps to this BPM or
Hmm.
100 jumps to this BPM.
Hmm.
And some of that is also just practical. You don't really get accurate timing by yourself. So, really the only way you can train is to count whatever score you're aiming for, and you just do that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Man, this is fun to kind of go down this speed rabbit hole. It's cool to come back to a lot of the stuff that I was thinking about, and hearing your perspective on it. I want to let's take a hard left here for a second. Stanford, you
Yeah.
started a jump rope club and a jump rope team at Stanford, right?
Yep.
So how did that go? And I I was reading from an article that I think was posted by Stanford in their newspaper, or something, and it
Mhm.
said that the Stanford club had a meteoric rise. How did that come about?
Yeah. That was really interesting. I was very, very lucky at the timing of when I, entered Stanford. So I, even before I got there, when I visited with my mom, Justin Meyer was there, and yeah, I know Justin for a long time because he was one of my first jump rope rivals. Always beat me in 3 minute. And so he like introduced me to like the campus and like took us on the tour, and I was like, welcome. By the way, I got connected with these two other jumpers here. They, were more performance based, but their names are Agatha and Josh. They're seniors next year, and they'd be interested in starting a team. So once I got on campus, I connected with them. Justin went abroad he was in like Italy, but working with Agatha and Josh, we really pushed through the paperwork, put the team together. We had this really important performance that Agatha was able to pull off for us, where we performed in front of all of the incoming students for the next
Nice,
ye're right, for
nice.
Advent Weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And so we performed, and I think it was a pretty good performance. And next year, that fall, where we really just plugged into the existing Stanford club, culture. which is that, we have like an activity fair and we say, come try out, you audition and you get onto the team. That's what all the clubs at Stanford do, right? And so now that we had the official paperwork done from that spring, so that was my frosh year, I tried to do some things where I would like, do like I did like a workout, like a jump rope workout workshop where
Mm-hmm.
I, had all the people in my dorm come and basically get their ass kicked by jump rope.
Right. Right. Yep.
Those poor things, they were very sore for a long time.
Yeah. Oh
But
man.
really in the fall, we were able to catalyze the momentum we had from that performance. People were interested. We had a tryout, and then that's really the beginning of Stanford Jump Rope as you see it today. I think I'm very grateful that Josh and Agatha were around the following year because I think Josh was doing a co-term. I think Agatha was doing a co-term as well or finishing up. Justin's like a phenomenal coach. And and Mason had come that year as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because Mason was with us in the fall, we were able to like do interesting performances and look cool and really teach at the very beginning. And that kind of set the tone. So, plugging into the existing culture. Justin was also a part of this one of the most popular clubs on Stanford. I'm trying to remember Taiko. It's like this Japanese drumming club.
That's cool.
Super cool, really, really good music. And they go for like generations of clubs where the alumni come and are super involved. And so,
Wow, that's
uh,
legit.
yes. And so what we just kind of stole a lot of stuff from Taiko. Like,
Nice.
right, like Taiko's doing it well, so it's
Yep.
like, hey,
Find what
we're just
works
going
and
to
emulate it. Yep.
yep, y'all roll out people. Okay, we'll do rollouts. Rollouts are this thing where after you make it in auditions, you knock on someone's door at like 5 a.m. before they're awake, and you like bang on their door and you say like, "Welcome to Stanford Jump Rope," and they have to do something like jump over rope, and we all get together and eat donuts and take a picture.
That is
So that's
so
like
cool.
it's really fun. It makes people feel a part of something, And when you're like a new person at a school, especially if you don't know anyone,
Yeah.
feeling part of something is very important. And I think that's probably the most important part of the club. Jump rope's a part of it, yes, but at the end of the day, it's just a convening of people and making people feel like they're part of something greater.
It's a real community. It's everyone coming together. There's this thing, jump
Hmm.
rope, that brings them together, but it's a bunch of humans enjoying being around this group or this smaller little sub tribe, which is really
Exactly.
neat. What did those practices look like with the club?
So we organized it such that we wouldn't take any performances in the fall so we could focus on just teaching and getting the fundamentals going. And so after tryouts, we do teach a lot of like the fundamental like crosses and stuff. We ask people to put together their routines. But then we focus on like teaching, the group routine or routines that we have in play for this particular season.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're making sure that people, drill the fundamentals and like can do them in sequence and, jump to the music. You also need to learn double dutch. Can you jump? Can you turn? As long as we get those fundamentals spun up, then we begin to focus on the performance season, which is Stanford has like 3 quarters. So in winter and spring quarter, we switch to more performances and it's getting ready for that very first performance. So do you have a routine? Do you can you be in this double dutch or this group thing? A lot of it is just getting ready for that and drilling it over and over and over again because drilling the
Mm-hmm.
mistakes out is really tough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there would be a lot of times where we have performance coming up and because people are busy, sometimes they'll miss practices. And so we do this thing where morning practice where, I know at 5 a.m. everyone's free.
Oh
So
my! You made them get up at 5.
sometimes it 5 or 6, like really stupid hours. There'd be times I show up to morning practice just without sleeping. But that's what we did. We put the work in to get ready for these performances. But we also do more fun things. Like we might do like a speed workout, or I think Mason especially focus on speed workouts and fundamentals, and doing things like besides just jump rope, but like jogging and other ways to just stay physically fit. Because people join the team for different reasons. Some people join just to stay fit. Some people join as like a physical reprieve from, the other stuff going on in their lives. Some people join because they want to be a part of a club. So you gotta try to walk the balance of hitting all those things, so that everyone feels included, without alienating folks because they're not getting what they want out of it.
I have a lot of respect for the way you've approached that, because I think what you've done, or what, your group did so well, is like legitimately understanding, like you said, the culture of where you were and understanding the people that you were creating this experience for. And yeah, I remember watching a lot of Stanford jump rope stuff, and seeing the group, and I noticed not only was it it was a very large club as far as,
Hmm.
college jump rope clubs go, but there was a very legitimate connection, and kind of in the back of my mind was, how it makes more sense now how you actually accomplished that, because to me, I had helped create a smaller jump rope club at UCSB, but
Hmm.
it was not the same. And I remember trying to get people to show up. We did not approach the culture the way you did, and it did not work out that well. And not that it was bad, it just wasn't, it wasn't that same idea of community like you're expressing. And like, it makes a lot of sense now. It's cool. I think this is a really important takeaway for anyone who is currently on a college team, or anybody who is looking to start a college team, is not to approach it from I'm a competitive jump roper perspective, but rather the way you did, which is, where am I? Who's around me? Who's successful in creating a club? What does the club actually mean to the people that are engaging? And how can I take jump rope and shape it into something that provides value to the people that are here? And I think that
Hmm.
your perspective and your awareness for that was genuinely phenomenal, and it makes a lot more sense now why it's been so successful. And it's still going, right?
Yeah, yeah. They I think they're transitioning into new president coming up soon, and I mean it's it's really fun to watch, especially now that I'm like no longer there, to like see it keep going. And there's people who are very passionate about Stanford jump rope, which I'm just so thankful for.
I mean, that is truly a testament to what it sounds like you and Justin kind of got going, because you've not just passed on skills and tactics, but you've passed on a sense of community, which is one of arguably the hardest things to put in place. So that is genuinely amazing, man. Nice job.
Thank you so much. I will say, it's also important to mention, Mason played a really big role in establishing that,
Mm.
as well as Agatha and
Hmm.
Josh. And I think the cool thing about jump rope is that one is ubiquitously hard, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and thankfully, I feel like we're at a spot where people were very intrigued at trying something that they know is hard, but like seeing the results. I think once people, it's a super addictive sport, right? You see it
Hmm.
all the time on Instagram. Once people get started, like they're just in there
They're
and there's
locked
no
in.
place to go. Like because once you start like getting those tricks that you spent hours working on, it just like the feeling is just incredibly addictive, which we have going for us. The other cool thing is that um, unlike some other sports, jump rope is also a form of expression.
Hmm.
And so people can bring their personal experiences into the sport in unique ways that competitive jumpers have never seen before. And I
True.
think that's one of the things I really enjoyed about being a part of Stanford Jump Rope is that, in the beginning we had like someone who's on the gymnastics team, someone who used to be a cheerleader, someone who did fly fishing. We had
Mm.
someone who did rhythmic gymnastics, and all these things came out in someone did like wushu, mixed martial arts, right? All these things came out in their jumping styles, right? And that's not something we could ever coach. That's just something they came in with because they had experience with it beforehand. Drum rope just was just a way to facilitate those, previous activities in a new way.
Hmm.
And so I think for another piece of advice for college jumpers is, you just want to like it's expression, and you want to be able to encourage people to bring what they have to the table, in whatever way makes sense for them.
Hmm.
I think because of that, it's you get buy-in a little more too, right? It's like, oh, this is my unique jump rope style that no one else can replicate because I'm the only one who's had this experience at this point.
Hmm. I think that really taps into something that I've noticed in myself and in the competitive part of the jump rope community, which is that I personally approached the UCSB club as, this is competitive jump rope. Here's how you can do a version of competitive jump rope. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of folks in the Instagram land basically come with that perspective as well, which is like, what you're doing is all right, but this is how competitive jump rope is done. This is how you can do it correctly. And
Mm-hmm.
what I like so much about what you're saying here is it's not about doing competitive jump rope correctly. It's about using this tool in whatever way fits you and your life the best. And
Mm-hmm.
and that makes it makes a lot of sense now why it's lasted even though, you guys are not there anymore, because you've actually tapped into the actual mindset of a real sport, which is not to seek to be the number one champion or be the most efficient, but just to have fun using the tool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and whatever way that pans out. So that's really awesome.
Thank you. I will say, I certainly fucked up throughout it in major ways. There's a couple things. So my biggest regrets were decisions I made as president of Stanford Jump Rope. A couple ones really loom over my head. But there are other models for collegiate jump rope as well. I think the one that most people have seen but probably don't know about is just like fusion jump rope in Japan.
Mm-hmm,
A
mm-hmm.
lot of those jumpers start doing double dutch when they enter college. They have their lifetime of dancing experience that they then apply to double dutch,
I did
and
not
it's
know that. That's
extremely
actually really
successful.
interesting.
Yeah. So like it. I think there might also be a fundamental misunderstanding of what competitive jump rope is as well, because at the end of the day, competition is just a performance, right?
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that? That's kind of why I took that pause there. Like when you say there's a fundamental misunderstanding of jump rope and it's a performance, I guess how have you seen it misinterpreted? Because it seems like there's more behind that statement.
Oof. Yeah. I do see a growing trend of a little more technically focused jump rope in the realm of competitive jumpers. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's really cool, right? We're doing skills more that we know are hard because
It's fun. It's
um,
a challenge.
it's a challenge, right? So if you're doing like a T-toe versus a normal toe, right, it's a little more technically precise in order to like pull it off, and it's fun to like get it right. And you would want to be awarded for that properly because it's actually harder, and I understand that. I think I came into the sport in an era where it was very much it was a little more flashy and a little more performance heavy. So the people, I was looking up to people like, Sean Hamilton
Mm-hmm.
or Timothy Martin or the Epps
I
brothers
was
or
gonna ask you about that, just to put it. I know I'm interrupting, and I apologize, but I
oh no,
do
it's
want to.
okay.
I was watching a video of you at 2008 Worlds,
Hmm.
and your style, the way this is so nuanced, but the way you were kicking back one of your feet really reminded me of Tim's style, and like
Yes.
the way you were doing your triples, like even your back tuck to a certain extent, like your
Hmm.
style really looked like his style.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, because I was trying to emulate him.
Yeah.
So when I started, right, if you've ever watched the Jump documentary, you know, they follow Nick Woodard, they follow Tori, they follow Marcus Taylor from the Roping Rockets.
Yeah, that
He's
was
like the villain in the documentary.
he kind of is. He kind of is.
Yeah, that's the team I started on. And at the time, Marcus was the world champion. And one of the criticisms in the documentary is that Marcus and our team focused more on the performance as opposed to the content and the intricacies and the creativity that some of the other teams focused on more.
Hmm.
So you got to remember, I came into the sport under that kind of culture.
Hmm.
Um, and at the time, the people who were winning, people like Timothy Martin, people like um, Sean, and to some extent, I'll say Nick, but they were focused on like a lot of jumping, like it was smooth, it flowed, you jump really high, you do these really epic tricks, interspersed throughout the routine, as opposed to like back to back to back really hard stuff, right?
Hmm.
That's a different era jump rope that we're in. It was not like that in the 2000s. And so the 2008 video, right? I am trying to emulate people like Marcus and Tim, in my jumping style. So you're right in noticing that even with the kickbacks, and there was a lot of time. Yeah, there was like the first USA All-Star tryout where all my favorite jumpers are there, and they're all doing these super high back tucks, and my back tuck was super low, and I just did it over and over and over again so that mine could look like theirs.
Man,
Because
it's so cool to hear you say that, because I have a similar story with the frog. Like one of my teammates got a double under frog before me, and I was pissed. And so like
yes,
I literally was in the gym, the same thing over and over and failing and slamming my hands into the ground because I wanted it.
yes. Oh man, I mean that makes me. The very first workshop I went to, Coach Frederick invited. I was very fortunate that Coach Frederick invited me with Marcus to like come attend. And I'll never forget being in the gym during like the workshop trying to learn. And this girl was like, looked like about my age, did this EBTJ, and I was still working on my TJ. And I was like, what the heck? And so she became one of my like biggest rivals. It's Erica Zen, and I like was always trying to like get at her level. And I'll never forget, at that All Star workshop. She did make the All Star team in that first year. She was 11.
Uh-huh.
She's like super good. And
Yeah.
so I was always just trying to like, can I at least be as good as her? And so another really really good rival to have when I was coming up. But that's all to say that like this the sport it's a performance sport, right? Most people enter the sport through the Jump Rope for Heart Federation, for example. There's a lot of teams that are part of that don't compete. It's competition, and at the end of the day, like you want to look good and like promote the sport and like feel good about that. And I think in the 2000s, it was a little more about like the showiness of it before like the major rule changes. And so now we're in this era where it's more Instagram focused. We have this like these kind of like divergent jump rope communities of like fitness versus like the competitors who are really just doing back to back to back really tough skills, and then also really intricate technical skills in terms of multiples and wraps and manipulation. But when you're on the competition floor, I mean, especially given that most of the judges are like parents, like they're volunteering, um, most people won't see those intricacies. And even people who are experienced jumpers, I don't think people give enough credit to how much you appreciate it when someone executes a trick very well in a nice way that is also hard, but maybe not as hard as it possibly could be because it wouldn't look as good. And so I think in some ways some people misunderstand what competition is because I would argue one of those is going to win more likely than the other.
Yeah, it's I did content judging for a small regional competition this a couple months ago in San Diego, and like even as someone who like I literally spend all my time breaking down skills to the most bare bones simplest way of explaining how to do a movement for a lot of different people, and I spend all my time literally like breaking down and deconstructing jump rope. And I was watching these routines, and dude, I could barely keep up with what I was watching. It
Mm-hmm.
moves so quickly that even as someone who has spent a lot of time not only watching routines but deconstructing them and really paying attention to them, it was still an extraordinarily challenging experience.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious there's a couple places I want to go, of course, a couple tangents off of here, but I'm curious what you think about the idea of putting in compulsory routines, because, and I don't think this is a novel concept. I'm sure I think I've talked about it with Devin and a couple other people, but
Mm-hmm.
from the judging perspective, like you're saying, adopting a model similar to gymnastics in given the current structure of competition makes a lot of sense to me, because
Mm-hmm.
as a judge, I mean, just strip away the sport and the culture and who we are and just take the act for what it is. The amount of variables that the mind has to be aware of is tremendous.
Yeah.
And there is no consistency and there is no pattern to help someone cognitively throughout that process. It's you're constantly being hit with, I have no idea what's coming, which on one hand makes the day go by pretty quickly, but on the other hand, it's a struggle. And like you're saying, the people that are up there, they are volunteers. They are
Yep.
parents. They are people who not for any ill intent, but have no understanding and no gauge about what skills and are what they are and how they compare in difficulty. And
Oof.
you know what I mean? Like an
Yes.
AS, why is someone who does an AS extraordinarily cleanly more impressive, or AS triple under cleanly more impressive than someone who does a TJ cleanly? Any jumper will tell
Mhm.
you that doing an AS cleanly is far more difficult than that TJ. Because, and if you actually break it down, in my opinion, because your body is moving the way it is, it's way harder to get your knees, pull them up, keeping your chest mostly upright in an AS versus in a TJ. And
Yep.
it's nuances like this that, yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm curious what your thoughts are on like compulsory routines.
Well, I will say something about the content judging. I think the scariest realization I had towards the end of high school I had been very successful in like competition at that point. I think between like 2011 to that point, I was winning a lot. But I realized that like winning is actually probably not enough because just because I win doesn't mean I'm the best. And I've fundamentally changed the
God,
way I thought about,
that's so true, man. Like,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. And
Hmm.
so I fundamentally changed the way I thought about jump rope and I started to try these higher level skills and it really humbled me. And I realized that I didn't actually know how hard those skills were.
Yep.
Right. So this is someone who's winning world competition who doesn't realize how hard some of the hardest skills in the sport are because I hadn't tried them yet.
Hmm.
And I would argue that the same thing is happening. I think when you look at someone like Porter or Hamisi, like I think Porter is actually a really good example because let's talk about he recently posted this video where he did a backflip
Yep.
TSTJ,
Yep. That dude,
right?
get out of here. Get out
That
of
is
here.
like so there's backflips with the rope. There's like a backflip TJ, and then there's like backflip AS TJ. It is literally unfathomable for most people to understand how hard that skill is.
Hmm.
I will probably never do that skill. That is a order of magnitude beyond my highest backflip skills, right? And I can do backflip TJ and backflip AS. It is a different level. And so if you're not doing backflip tricks, you might not understand like
It's
how
true.
crazy that stuff was. Like
It's
it's
true.
so absurd. So, like
It's funny you mentioned that because like Lee and I talked about this a lot on one of our several podcasts we did. And we talk about, I think Lee brought up, if you look at a cross versus a TS, fundamentally they're almost the same.
yep.
Fundamentally. But when you actually go and use them and train them, they're not the same at all. And
No.
especially in your, like, even as someone like, I've done backflip TJ, I haven't done a backflip AS. And because I know how hard the backflip AS is, I have that perception of like, yeah, the T, but yeah, he did like a backwards. Did he do TS into a TJ?
TS into TJ.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I just
It's
I
obscene.
don't even know.
It's
I don't even know what to say about that. Like that's
it's absolutely obscene. Like,
yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. And which and I've talked about this with a couple of other jumpers too. It really not only does it highlight that the idea of in sports, the person who sets the benchmark then opens it up for the rest of the people because now they see what's actually possible. But
mhm.
like, okay, so what is it that makes someone that good? What is the variable that Porter and Seth and that Idaho group has unlocked that has brought them to this new level? And
Ooh,
to be honest with you, from what I've seen, and I really want to hear what you have to say about this, from my perspective, it seems like literally it comes down to the team and the environment they're around.
hmm.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I have a lot of thoughts. I think there's ways to. I have some theories based on just some anecdotal experiences. So let's go back to Hamisi's story, right? Hamisi started in Tanzania. He like put in a lot of time, right? A lot of time, like every day, hours every day, training, and that's how he got so good so fast. I mean, And so by the time he comes to World Jump Rope in, I think it was 2011 or 2012, he'd only been jumping for like a year or two, but he's like phenomenally good, like scarily good, because given 2 more years, he's gonna be on the podium. He's gonna be on the podium, like
Right.
crushing it, and that's what happened. But he wasn't able to do. There was no full. There's no backflip. There's no moneymaker until he comes to Washington. Or he comes to like Washington State with the Hot Dog USA,
Mm-hmm.
and the key there is that there he has a gymnastics facility with the spring floor, with trampolines, with coaching that allows him to get those skills. Not that he wasn't working hard enough before, but now he has the equipment to train those skills and master them and throw it out on the competition floor. Now we see Himisi as the dude who's doing double backflips, the craziest flips. He had none of those things until he came to Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similar story with me, right? I was able to get a full, but I lost it. I would land on my head a lot when I was like just training it outside in my yard. It wasn't until Miss Kennedy invited me to jump rope gymnastics camp 2013, that summer, when I was able to like train in their gymnastics facility with LJ and Nick, who taught me how to do my full, that I was able to actually like master it and pull it off. Same thing with and so when I went to like Stanford, right, now I had access to a gymnastics gym every week because they had like an open gym on campus that I could attend. It was like $5. I had like this wrestling room with mats that I could train in.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I did the eye dive for the first time, right? I wasn't going to do it in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I got a lot better at Stanford. And I will say part of that is because I had access to the equipment I needed to train it. You're probably not going to get a backflip TJ, backflip AS if you don't have a trampoline. I didn't realize that until I had a trampoline. I was like, oh, I actually need to rep this a lot in order to like master the movements. And you can't rep it as much if it's so destructive every time you do it on the grass. You need a trampoline to like get it. I probably won't get like I can't imagine anyone getting a backflip TS TJ if you don't at least try it on the trampoline 1st.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that you need that. So part of it is, there's something needs to be said about the team culture. I agree. I think there needs to be a good culture where you're pushing each other to that, like, the limit and like encouraging creativity. There's something to be said about the work. Someone like Porter, someone like Zach, someone like Kamisi, they really put in the work. They are jumping almost every day for hours, not just like an hour session, hours.
Mm-hmm.
They're so much better than everyone else because they put in so much more time. But then the third aspect that is really important is equipment. You really do need the equipment for some of these harder skills.
Mm-hmm.
You won't master Death Wish if you're just doing it on gym floor. You need to have softer equipment so that your wrists die when you're trying it. And then coaching. Coaching is another important aspect. The Idaho people have really good coaching. I mean, she's one of the best coaches ever. Same thing with Miss Kennedy.
Who's the coach?
And oh gosh, what is her name?
We can double back to it later too if you remember.
Yeah, but I mean, she's really, really good coach, and that's part of the reason that they have so many jumpers that pop up that are really good. Same thing with the hot dogs. They've consistently been really good because for decades they've had like A-level coaching. You really need to have all four of those things come together to produce some of the best jumpers in the world.
What's so interesting about that and about both of our answers actually is that neither of us said talent. And I actually do genuinely believe that it is far less about the talent. I mean, sure, if someone who is not inclined for sports whatsoever, they may have a harder time. But I mean, to be honest with you, I was never predisposed to doing any flips. I still have a huge issue with a lot of flipping skills, and I've never been someone who is I didn't grow up and like, oh man, like I'm crushing sports. You know what I mean? Like that was not my MO. I was not the guy who was sports oriented, but I think that around, again, like we're saying, around the right environment with the right tools and stuff, that makes all the difference.
Yes.
It's interesting too to hear your breakdown of that, because when I apply that to myself, not that this is a brand new idea, because I have thought about this in terms of myself quite a bit, but when you break down, you have equipment, you have coaching, and then these environmental factors. Like for a large portion of my jumping, arguably the majority of it, I have not had a formal coach leading me through or showing me what to do. And
Yep.
on the first team I was on, and I'm sure you understand how this goes. After a certain threshold, I went pretty nuts and was going to a 2-hour practice and then going home and practicing 2 hours. Like that was the thing. And so when you do that, you tend to rise up in the level on your team to the point where you end up being, at the top. But then I didn't have another top. You know what I mean? I didn't go to camps. I wasn't my area of the team I was on. There wasn't another jumper that was disproportionately greater than I was. So it's interesting to hear your breakdown and see it like, okay, that makes a lot of sense in terms of like where my skills have plateaued and where, other jumpers have not, given, not that it's, just the coach that makes them, but like seeing that element exists or doesn't exist. In my case, it makes a lot of sense and really shows the value of having someone who understands the sport and understands how to push you forward and show you what needs to come next.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say another piece to that is I noticed that I was more competitive when I was more involved with Stanford jump rope because I was doing a lot of teaching, and like lower level stuff, like, fundamental crosses, doing the group routines. A lot of these really good jumpers come from teams where they do have a large component of it is teaching and working on these like fundamental skills over and over again for, the littles or the new people. That's an aspect I didn't realize also plays a really important part. As I've been doing Mike's, fundamental crosses, I've noticed my multiples getting better and like other parts of my jumping getting better. And I would say that I do think that, coaching is a super important part of it. And I think the flip side to that is you're probably also on a team that is structured enough where you need to spend a significant amount of time teaching. And I think that also plays a role in maintaining like world champion level skill sets.
Because you actually have a thorough understanding of what you're doing. And like I found in the last couple of years, or I guess more than a couple of years if I really break it down, I've really been far more focused on coaching people who are not from a competitive jump rope background. And I've spent a great deal of time like really like people who do not come from a competitive jump rope background. The understanding of how the jump rope works is not innate like it is from any, like yourself, like you've been jumping since you were 5, like you had a rope in your hand from the beginning, like you have this innate ability and understanding of how to use that tool. A lot of these folks really the breakdown and the coaching they need is so much different. And
yes,
I coached some competitors. I have been coaching competitors a lot more this year. It's not a crazy amount, but I have done a lot more proportionally speaking. And I've noticed these kids who are used to jump rope, the coaching they need is so like by the time I'm halfway through a sentence, they filled in the rest. Like they know it's, you know what I mean? They know it's coming. And in breaking things down for this growing part of the jump rope community that do not come from the competitive background, I found that I'm at a place now where, if I'm not working out, obviously I'm not hitting quad combos as easily, but like by and large, my skills are the most refined and intricate and varied that they've ever been.
yes.
And I do need to put in, I would like to put in more work to bring back a lot of strength and continue, raising that and getting new skills. But to your point, having broken things down and having the understanding I have of jump rope now is leagues beyond where I was when I was, training for competition. And in doing that, I do feel like the skill set, though not as strong at the moment, it is definitely a lot more substantial.
It's a universe and there's so many different parts to explore. And just because you leave one part of the universe doesn't mean like you're out of it, just different part. And it's kind of hard to do all parts at once.
No, it's true. And like, that's why, like, earlier you mentioned, the different parts of the community. And I think that a lot of the work that I do is meant to, the way you just said, different parts of the universe. It's not that we are a different type of jump roper. We're all jump ropers. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's how you're using the tool and how you're going about it that is different. And it's been really interesting to see. I think the sentiment that I've felt through Instagram, and of course this is very subjective, but the sentiment that I felt, again, like I was saying earlier, is that a lot of competitors see a lot of these people coming from a fitness background or a fitness goal with jump rope, and they see the skills that they're doing and see it as potentially a lower version of the correct way to do things, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That is the sentiment that I've felt, but I think actually a better way to describe the reality of the way the jump rope community sits now is exactly what we've been discussing this whole time. Of there are many different ways to use it, and we now have this really, in my opinion, this really great and multidimensional use and application in ways that competitive jump ropers would never have imagined, for the exact reason you described when we were breaking down the Stanford jump rope team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that being part of that really opened my eyes to what the sport is and can be. It's so fascinating, and I think that I think there are people in the competitive world, especially at the very highest levels, who see and recognize the value that the people who might not be competitive bring to the sport. And I've seen some really wild and creative stuff, and I'm always impressed by the enthusiasts who I think they are pushing the boundaries of the sport in ways
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't have imagined, and I can learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. I've been trying to get more into fitness jump rope lately, just because during the quarantine, I have more friends asking me, Stewart, how do I get a good workout? What kind of jump rope do I need? What skills should I be learning? And I'm realizing it's really tough to translate, what my skill sets into approachable fitness level, like fitness workout. And I'm having to do a lot of research and learning in order to do that well.
Yeah, it's the same, but it's not. The tool is the same, but
Mm-hmm.
it's cool to hear you say that, because that has been where my mind has been at for a while now. And I mean, it's true. Like, even though it is jump rope and we might be using a lot of the same terminology or a lot of the same skills, the way in which we apply them is wildly different and
Mm-hmm.
honestly not the same at all. Hey, before you go, I just wanted to say one last thing. One of my main goals for this podcast is to share the stories, of other jumpers and provide a full picture about everything that's possible with a jump rope. The more people that hear this, the better. And it would really help me out if you sent this podcast to somebody you know, whether in real life or digitally on Instagram, Facebook, whatever platform you use. It would mean the world to me. So that's it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, lunch, evening, whatever time it is for you right now. See you later.